All right.
All right, well, I will officially call the meeting to order for the Board of Trustees regular meeting for January 3rd, 2022. First announcement is a check over $25,000. I guess the first announcement's wishing everyone a happy new year, and hopefully it's a healthy one and a boring one. I'll take boring and healthy. That's my goal for the year. The first official announcement is a check for over $25,000, which was for Pacific Trans Global Construction Corp. Its purpose was DPW interior renovation due to Hurricane Ida, and that's from the general fund insurance reimbursement for $98,579.60. And Larry, do you know if that job is complete now, or?
They are close.
Okay.
Not entirely complete.
But close. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Correspondence, we actually didn't have any, so I will open up to any public comment if there is any. Otherwise, I'll move on to the consent agenda. I don't know if anyone has any questions on the consent agenda. So Larry Lonke was raising his hand, but otherwise I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Now, Brenda, I understand that you're going to be presenting the 2021 independent audit tonight in lieu of the auditors.
Yep. And
Great.
anyone have any questions as I'm going along? I'm happy to answer them. Or Larry, if you have something to add, please do.
Yep.
Something just here we go. Okay. Well, this is the audit report. Our auditing firm is PKF O'Connor Davies. They have a special division for governmental clients and is used by many municipalities in the area. Before we delve into the audit, let me explain a few things about the audit process. For those that are in the audience or that haven't been through the audit presentation before, the village budget and finances do run on a calendar year, but do not run on a calendar year. They're on a fiscal year from June 1 to May 31st. So the financials are expressed with the year ending May 31st, 2021. So throughout that time, during that fiscal year, there are many, many financial activities and processes that take place. Tax bills are rendered and collected based on the budget, as well as water billings, payroll, weekly payment of accounts payable, and it's the treasurer's office responsibility that they prepare and present the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Those are governed by the New York State Controller General, basically. It also includes, under our responsibility, the design and the maintenance of internal controls of the financial transactions. This is important so that the financial statements are free of any misstatement, whether they're due to an error or to possible fraud. So the purpose of the audit is to have an independent party review the financial statements and financial operation of the village to express an opinion to obtain assurance about whether the financial statements are free from any material misstatements or any non-conforming accounting procedures. So the audit process, it takes place pretty much soon after we close our books and prepare our accruals and all the documents necessary. And it takes about a week. It's usually a team of about 4 members of the accounting staff from O'Connor Davies. It takes about a week and it's very in-depth. They do extensive testing of all of our many transactions. They'll determine how many. It could be close to 80, 90 transactions, and they'll review things such as deposits, collection of taxes, water, payroll, accounts payable, our bidding process, just to mention a few items there. So our accounting is on a modified accrual basis. We do accruals for the end of the measurement period, which is May 31st, and they will make sure and examine that those accruals are substantiated. So after the examination process, which also has to conform to generally accepted accounting principles, and opinion is rendered. That's very important. That's on page 1 and 2 of our financial statement. And we can just go down to the bottom where there's the opinion right there. In our opinion, the financial statements, that's the first paragraph, referred to above, present fairly in all material aspects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the village as of May 31, 2001, and the respective changes in financial position and the respective budgetary comparison for the general and water funds for the year ending in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. And there are no it's an unqualified opinion, as strange as that term sounds, meaning there's no qualifying statements around it. And that is basically the highest opinion you can get in an audit. That's unqualified and there are no modifications. So that being said, you're probably wondering how the village did. And we do, they call it an MD&A, management discussion. And before we'll go into that, we will talk about the funds for those that are haven't maybe gone through this process before, or at least the budget process. It'll kind of cue you up as to the terms for each of our funds. But the general fund is the largest of our funds, and it represents the day-to-day operations of most of the village departments, such as DPW, police, get general government support of with the administration, recreation and parks, and all other revenues are collected there. That is our largest general fund. And it's basically revenue driven, and of course our tax levy. That's the biggest single revenue for the village, is our taxes. So that being said, our library fund also has revenue derived from taxes, but we account for that separately in its own fund. Each fund is independent of each other. I'll just go through the funds, and then we have water fund and sewer. And the distinction there is that it's not tax driven, it's user based, it's based on the water consumption by our residents. So they're billed accordingly to their water consumption, and that supports the departmental expenditures. We have 2 more funds, it's capital projects, and those are for our long-term capital projects that don't close out year over year. So they're multi-year, so therefore we don't close them at the end of each fiscal year as we do with the other funds. Lastly, there's a debt service fund, and that represents really it funnels revenues together that pay for our long-term debt. So each of those funds levy the amount appropriate, water fund, general fund, to be paid for our bonds. So that being said, our general fund, we'll talk about that, how that did for the year. We talked about, let's see what we have here. Well, as an overview, it was an extremely challenging year. If you can think back to that whole year, it was the first year that the whole year was under the grips of the pandemic. And it really challenged us greatly because we were trying to always maintain essential services for the village and dealing with different schedules for employees to comply with the protocol of keeping our village staff safe, and to make sure we can continue services with illnesses popping up now and then. But during that time, despite those challenges and everything else going on, our general fund increased by over $1 million. I have that in the first paragraph there. To be exact, $1,059,620,000. That was our unassigned fund balance. So that's the amount that's available solely to be spent at the discretion of the village. That was a huge increase. Basically, it was driven on the expense side. I can go over some of the highlights of that. Maybe Larry, want to go to the page? Let's keep going a little further. Here we go. I'll also mention when we talk about the revenues for the village, it's not really a revenue, but it's identified within the revenues is the allocation of surplus. That $1 million that we were ahead for the year on, that's the results of both your revenues and your expenses. So basically, the expenses were contributed about $1.5 million, and revenues, we originally were going to allocate over 800,000 in surplus, 834. Because the revenues came in high, we did not use up 800,000. We only used up 400,000. Just thinking back, we started that budgetary year allocating about 380,000 just to balance the budget and to bring our tax rate level. And then we utilized another almost 200,000 towards capital projects. And then we had over 250,000 that had to be spent to cover expenses for COVID. So that was during that time period, that designation of 800,000. But because our revenues came in strong, we only utilized about 400. Some of the strong revenues was the sales tax. There was a 1% increase that was during the year. And then it was really surprising how much the revenues picked up once we got through that second quarter of 2020. Economic activity was strong, and the new legislation also taxed internet sales. And I think that really helped, along with the 1% increase in the local sales tax. So that contributed about 260,000 towards that surplus. That's the first item there. The mortgage tax, as everyone remembers, real estate activity really increased. The mortgage tax, which we thought was going to decrease during that time period, actually increased. And the village benefited by over 111,000. That's the next item, more than the adopted budget. Building permit fees were extremely higher than also budgeted by 350,000. While those were strong, though, our recreation department, as you can recall, was really not doing any summer camp. There were no programs. Court revenues were down. So they were over $750,000 less than originally budgeted. So those are the different moving parts you can see within the revenues. Federal aid we received of 270,000 that really helped offset expenses that were COVID driven, as well as the tropical storm Isaias. We also have some higher revenues that were interest and penalties and utility tax. Those were less significant, but they were still there. So those are really the moving parts. Back up to the beginning of that page, you can see the effect of the use of fund balance drove it down. So we start off the year planning on the revenue side, a deficit of 800,000. But those revenues that I highlighted contributed to not using so much. And then, of course, we had the shortfall of over 750 between rec and theater. So I just want to paint you the kind of picture. So revenues as a total revenues, it did not exceed budget, but it was not the deficit that was originally projected. Okay. On the expenditure side, that's really where we really picked up on the fund balance side. Of the $1.5 million that was not spent, about 500,000 was due to benefits. Mostly the medical benefits. We had 2 consecutive years of no increases. That was part of it. And then I think some employees, we had some deferred hirings. Of course, we budgeted medical there that was not utilized. So that was significant. And then the other $1 million was really salaries that were not expended due to the pandemic. You can see that in the top line in the court. We have some money left in contingency. There was some money unspent I have here in low gasoline prices. So I don't expect that again. But then we had some surplus generated from public safety, the police department, and then, of course, the Parks and Rec. So while their revenues were down, commensurate was also lower expenses for personnel and programs. So combining both the revenue and activity and your expenditure activity, we received the net increase of the previously mentioned over $1 million, $1 million. Okay, so that's the general fund. Now, when we measure the general fund surplus, we also look at it in terms of how does that compare to our total budget? We've had a policy internally to keep that really not much higher than 25%, sometimes been closer to 30, but this year it came in at 33%. Leading up to the close of the fiscal year, we were aware of that. Larry and I had that discussion, seeing what was happening within the budgets. So for that reason, we decided, I guess, at the same time we were closing our budget, when doing the capital budget, to utilize a substantial amount of that fund balance. So while we closed the year on the books at 33% of general fund revenues, we used over a little over $1 million, 1.1 million, towards the 21-22 capital budget. So that's bringing it back down to where we would like to have it, of about 25%. So I was happy we were able to do that, and we didn't need to borrow as much this year. We only borrowed for water fund because that's not property tax driven. It's user based, and you need to account for that separately because it's revenue from the water sales versus tax revenue. So are there any questions on general fund activity? If not, I'll proceed to the water fund. Water fund was interesting. We had quite a number of repairs due to water main breakages during the year, but basically it came in at a level amount. We had a slight decrease of about $5,000 in the fund balance, but given the size of the total fund, as well as the projection of revenues, that's really a level year. In comparing that fund balance, which is just shy of 300,000. So we're still happy to have that 300,000 and fund balance, because it took a long time to come out of the deficit that we had about 10 years ago. So this is only the second year that we've had a positive fund balance in the water fund. That is about 11% of its revenues. So at 11%, we're still budgeting to increase that fund balance and get that a little bit higher. There's about a contingency of about 200,000 in water that, if unspent, will contribute to an increase in fund balance for the coming fiscal year, or the current year we're in. So other than that, there was not too much else to really. Things were strong. We maintain our strong Moody's rating, our bond rating, and the audit went very smoothly. And we're very happy with the results, considering the year that we went through and the uncertainty that we went through. And you can see that the village is strong and can weather a storm such as COVID, and we're doing well. We'll do an interim report when we do budget as to where the village is, but it's in very good standing.
Well, we kind of use this as the proxy for kind of a financial checkup every year, Brenda. I think what we're seeing here is the kind of leap to action of yourself and Larry and all the staff at Village Hall, as well as the department heads that adopted kind of pandemic budgets, even though it wasn't something we had ever planned for. But we were able to cut costs, anticipating the loss in revenue and kind of stay ahead of it. I think that, I think some of the biggest surprise for us, I think, was the strong sales tax revenue, which was a nice surprise. But, overall, I think that, every year we try to be conservative, and every year we seem to still have a bit of a upward surprise. I think that the continued strength in the revenue from the building department has been, a constant. But we keep saying that there's a lot of one-offs built into that. Like we had the RZ Country Club project. We have all these kind of one-off projects that seem to continue to help. But we don't take it all in say the budget every year, because we can't necessarily anticipate it. So I think both yourself and Larry, as well as the Board of Trustees, continues to be very conservative in budgeting, which has helped us every year. And I think what we've been so successful that we've been able to start using some of that surplus to offset, kind of capital budget items. And obviously we've been using some each year in the budget as well to kind of return some of that, excess tax money, which is really what it is. But, again, I think that, it's always kind of a relief is not the right word, but it's kind of, it's satisfying and it's reassuring to have a surplus. I don't know, we don't really want $1 million surplus every year, but we certainly don't want a pandemic every year either. So, I think you please thank your department, and Larry, thank you, your team as well, Karen and everyone, and all the department heads for, kind of tightening the belt and being very realistic and very conservative, and not having any oops surprises. So, I think that we've come to expect this. It's been like this just about every year that I've been on the board. But we have to remember that this isn't really the norm. I don't think every village and municipality necessarily has such a conservative, kind of take on revenues and expenses, and tries to keep expenses so under wrap, and creatively tries to find ways to save money, even though, my first two budgets back in 09 and 10, I think we were kind of trying to put the screws to everybody. And we realized that the best way to do it is really empower the department heads to look at their operations first, figure out what's necessary, what isn't necessary, let them figure out ways to save money. And it's been, very successful. And I think, Larry's direction, your direction, to the department heads, as well as that kind of, the Board of Trustees continuing to have that, let's not just spend, people's tax money, let's spend it all very wisely and conservatively. I think that that's just embedded in everything we do now, which is why it's almost become commonplace. But I don't want us to think that it is commonplace, because it's fantastic. It's exactly where we want to be, and no negative surprises are always the best kind. So the lack of surprise is always the best kind of surprise. So I don't really have any questions. I don't know if anybody else does. For Mitchell and Arlene, governmental accounting is a little odd sometimes, the different buckets and things. Obviously, you can ask questions now, but I found it helpful to sit down with Brenda back when I first got on the board, even though I was a CPA and I wasn't a GASB expert for sure. And, she definitely helped me understand some of it. Some of the transfers and things, they're kind of clunky, but they're just kind of accounting, items that sometimes don't really mean anything. You'll see a lot of them on our on the consent agendas. Sometimes it's just like closing out a line to send it to another line, or we get money, we get reimbursed from the county for transporting prisoners, and it looks like a very complicated transaction, but it's really just moving things from one bucket to another to account for it. But it's not intuitive, at least it wasn't to me. And I think it's feel free to sit down with Brenda. I mean, feel free to ask questions tonight as well. But
Absolutely.
But if you if you want to kind of go through these and say, because I remember some of the line items to me were even odd.
And come in, a tour of my office at any time also, to come in, become familiar with the functions of the different people and different staff people.
I think it takes a couple of years to really kind of see, at least it did for me, but a couple of years to really understand it. I think getting the general fund versus the capital budget versus the water is probably the easy part. And then it's like, okay, now let's figure out the rest of it. But take your time and go through it. I think sitting down with the financials for an hour or so and see if you have questions for Brenda or Larry or the board, it's probably an hour well spent.
So I want to also thank the department heads for just being very reactionary to things that happen as they happen with the economy, with COVID, with their departments, and to always be proactive in thinking about things ahead and how we can do things better, and to react to things as they happen. Not react after they've happened, kind of react either before they happen or as they're happening, so that we can maintain our budgets. And also to thank my staff, who does a lot of the heavy lifting every day, and very diligent people, and do their work very well.
Thank you.
Brenda, a quick question on the improvement in our bond rating. Does that happen as a result of the audit, or does that happen independently of the audit? And how do we get to take advantage of an improved bond rating? Does that affect us on a yearly basis, or only once every 3 or 4 years when we're actually doing the major borrowing?
The only time that we go back to Moody's, it's an expensive proposition to get an update in. They do renew it, so they do look at our financials every year, but we don't go through a blown out Moody's interview. That's really done when we do our long-term borrowing. Because that was not done this past year. It was done 2 years prior. Because we had one new ban and one ban renewal. So that's when it was done. They did an update last year and they maintained it. So they do look at our financials and our fund balance. And then when we just did our ban, we have an option at that point to do an official statement, which is also an expensive proposition. We decided it wasn't worth it for the size of our ban, but based on our financials, and they do use the audit, those that buy our bonds, and the rates we received were excellent, and that's part because our financials are strong. And I think if we can improve the water fund balance, that would also help to improve our bond rating. That was one thing that really helped to get it up a little bit higher, was a strong fund balance and no longer have any deficits in any of our funds.
Right, that got paid out last year. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, our bond rating is AA1, which is one step below AAA. So it's unusual for a level of government as low as ours to be rated AAA, to be honest with you, because of all the tax burden that is above us. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of a layered approach that they look at it. But it's, our fund balances are strong, and that's what they look for.
Yeah, and I remember when we got feedback from Moody's that it was kind of one of those strange things where they said they couldn't upgrade us too much on one go either. But we did have that. We did have that deficit in the water for, I don't know, about 15 years, Larry, something like that. So I think that was really a game changer, because it just looked funny on our financial statements. So getting that done so diligently over the years, is a big plus. And it's almost like right now our rates can't go much lower because the overall rates are so low. But this is something that could really help us if inflation stays like this and rates continue to increase. It could mean a lot more than it does right now. Now it's probably a rounding error, but if rates for 6-7%, it could be a big difference of 1% or 2 as opposed to a couple basis points.
And it's all of this is a balancing act. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, Moody's doesn't care what our fund balance target is. They'd like it to be 50%. And if it was, we'd be AAA. But and we could have kept it at 33% or whatever it was, fund balance as a percentage of revenues. But you all have to balance that between, your bond rating and looking at your constituents in the face and saying, we have your money, we can't just keep holding on to it indefinitely. So it's a balancing act. But we feel that, somewhere in that 25% range is more than healthy enough to sustain the village through really any disaster. I think we proved that just recently. And still have a healthy bond rating at the same time. Maybe not AAA, but still very close. So that's the balancing act we're trying to do here.
Do we have to formally adopt them, or anything? No, just
nope.
Okay.
Good.
Just a presentation, FYI. Great. And speaking of adopting, why don't we move on to the 2022 Westchester County Hazard Mitigation Plan?
Okay, so so the village has participated for at least 5 or 6 years with the county in developing a hazard mitigation plan. Hazard mitigation plan is not required. It's very healthy planning, but it's not required by anyone. However, if you do want to apply for FEMA assistance, not direct disaster assistance, but mitigation assistance, even dam safety assistance, which we do have a couple of dams in town. You need to have a fully adopted hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan, we've done it jointly with the County of Westchester, which saves the village a tremendous amount of money. They're not cheap to develop, but we've participated with every other community in Westchester in developing this hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan is maybe a little redundant, but it identifies all of the possible hazards, natural disasters that could take place, earthquake, flood, winter storm, you name it. And it identifies which ones are most likely and have a high probability of occurring and could have high impacts on the village. And it identifies responses to those hazards and ways to mitigate the impact of those disasters. So, we're not going to go through the hazard mitigation plan here. I had circulated drafts in the past. The Westchester County Hazard Mitigation website has a complete draft of the plan. And there are separate chapters for every municipality in the county. If you may have noticed, our chapter identifies a wide variety of hazards, most of which are related to flooding and winter storms and wind and those types of things. And it identifies the areas that can be greatly impacted and identifies ways to mitigate the problems. And so that plan, again, it's not, we're not locked into only addressing those issues. Obviously, if new issues come up, there was a time, 10 years ago that we didn't think that the Hudson River could cross over the Metro North Railroad tracks, but as it turns out, it did. So, and so you make adjustments in your plan and how you look at things, even in responding to, pandemics and things like that. So, that plan is required. Each municipality in the county is required to adopt that plan, and that's what's before you tonight. With the adoption would make us eligible as early as this month to apply for FEMA discretionary funding, mitigation funding. Whether we will or not is yet to be determined. We need to identify a cost-effective set of projects to apply for, but this plan will at least unlock our ability to do that once adopted. That's it.
So this plan, and I know I've approved this in the past, but again, just for me to understand, this plan is somewhat customized to Irvington as a village. It's not just a Westchester County checkoff list, but in a way it is a checkoff list because it gives us the minimum things which are required for us to then qualify for federal funding. Is it a list that we say we want to achieve these things over this period of time or this amount of time and try to achieve things over the course of a year? Or are these sort of larger scale and longer scale projects?
Yeah, it's a combination. I'd say a good number of them are larger scale. I'll give you a quick tour, without going through page by page, but there's lots of kind of preamble background information about the village and about who was involved in the planning of this document, which obviously is myself and the police department and the building department and DPW, of course. There's again a lot of boilerplate here. Background information talks about some of this talks about what ordinances we have in place. Again, just this is more descriptive of our village, but the real nuts and bolts, and I'll scroll down to the real. Again, this is all background descriptive type information. But here's where we start getting into what some of the risk assessment is what they call it, where we start getting into specific to our village of areas of flooding. Again, I'm not going to focus on all of this, but there are tables that follow these maps. Again, this is all descriptive here. It talks about some of the past events, all of which you probably remember clearly. These are some of the rankings of which things are, high hazard versus lower hazard. So of course, the ones that are, in the orange and red are ones that we focus in on more than others in terms of mitigating them. We identify critical facilities, as you can see here, and again, all just background. But again, going down, so there's a recap of previous mitigation actions, so items we've identified in the past, where we identify the things that have either been completed or which haven't been completed or are still in progress. There's a number of items here. Some of the culvert work that you recall very clearly, Station Road and Hudson View Park, some of that work. So again, this just gets us status from the previous set of items, but the new ones going forward are identified in a separate table. And again, that's getting towards the end here. Sorry. So these are some of the initiatives. There are estimated timelines listed here, and none of them are all that quick because many of these are very large projects. So all of this, we spent a pretty significant amount of time. Meadow Way, there's a few areas that we need to deal with, as you can see here, Barney Brook. We also did take in comments from the community and the county in total. We kind of publicized this, and we did get a few comments that we passed along to the engineers who prepared this, and they may have been included in here. So pretty detailed stuff here. Flood control projects along Barney Brook. There's some issues we have for sure. Senior Center. All right, so that gives you a flavor of it. All right. Any other questions about that, or we can sit down and yeah.
That document, is that available online in the document center, or where is it?
Yeah. Well, it's actually not on our website. We have it on. It's on the Westchester County Hazard Mitigation Plan website, which on the agenda there was a link to that, but I'll show you real quick here.
Can you just send that link around one more time?
Yeah. It's westchesterhmp.com is what it is, and the document, you can, the link to the document is all here, and if you scroll down, you'll see Village of Irvington's specific, just the Irvington annex of this plan, and you can look at anyone else's, of course, but all right, that's not, sorry, I wasn't really sharing that here. So this is the Westchester HMP website. There's all kinds of information. They were posting the drafts out here, but if you explore the plan, you'll see the entire document up front, but you could also go section by section and locate just the villages section right here. And that's what we were just looking at. All right. So I'll send around the link. In fact, I can do it in the chat while we're talking here.
Actually, if you send it as email, I can save it somewhere.
Yep, we'll do.
But you can peruse it while I read the resolution as well. Any other
I
questions?
think you're going to be done sooner than it takes to read it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could probably go through the whole plan. It's pretty, no, it's not that long. It's only one page. Whereas all jurisdictions within Westchester County have exposure to natural hazards that increase the risk to life, property, environment, and the county and local economy. And whereas proactive mitigation of known hazards before a disaster event can reduce or eliminate long-term risk to life and property. And whereas the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, Public Law 106-390, established new requirements for pre and post-disaster hazard mitigation programs. And whereas a coalition of Westchester County municipalities with like planning objectives has been formed to pool resources and create consistent mitigation strategies within Westchester County. And whereas the coalition has completed a planning process that engages the public, assesses the risk and vulnerability of the impacts of natural hazards, develops a mitigation strategy consistent with the set of uniform goals and objectives, and creates a plan for implementing, evaluating, and revisiting the strategy. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Irvington, 1, adopts in its entirety the 2022 Westchester County Hazard Mitigation Plan as the jurisdiction's natural hazard mitigation plan, and resolves to execute the actions identified in the plan that pertain to this jurisdiction. 2, will use the adopted and approved portions of the plan to guide pre and post disaster mitigation of the hazards identified. 3, will coordinate the strategies identified in the plan with other planning programs and mechanisms under its jurisdictional authority. 4, will continue to support the mitigation planning committee as described within the plan. 5, will help to promote and support mitigation successes of participants in this plan. 6, will incorporate mitigation planning as an integral component of the government and partner operations. 7, will provide an update of the plan in conjunction with the county no less than every 5 years. I will make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right.
Great, thank you.
Next up are reports of boards, standing committees, and officers, trustee liaison reports. I feel like we're without an order because we're not sitting there, but we'll start with Mark because that's how we traditionally had started.
Yeah. No updates yet because no one's really met since the assignments were finalized.
Okay. Doc?
Yes, let me just find mine. Give me 1 second. First of all, from the Irvington Volunteer Fire Department, they want people to know that the new chief's car is in service and is responding to calls. As a matter of fact, I think they responded to a call yesterday. They have trainings on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of every month. The January trainings on 1/4 is Battalion 14 foam operations. And on 1/18 is the annual workplace violence, bloodborne pathogen training. That's from the fire department. From Parks and Rec and Parks, excuse me. I mentioned the other day that there were 85 homes of seniors and families that received the holiday packages. And I really just wanted to mention a handful of people by name who have been helping, not just for this, but throughout the COVID pandemic, helping make deliveries to families in need and to seniors. Joe just asked me to take a second to mention by name Leo Penzine, Chet Kerr, Nikki Grados, Francis O'Shea, Adam Krieger, and Elaine Cardera, along with the staff, particularly Laura and Mike, the leaders of this most recent program for Thanksgiving and Christmas deliveries. There are going to be a lot of new programs restarting. As they prepare to restart programs, it's important to note that they're taking all actions to try and keep staff and participants safe. Staff leaders have been given everything they need to try and make sure their program areas can be made safe. Staff are provided with reminders on steps that need to be taken in case of a positive case. When holding a program in any of the school district buildings, guidelines established by the school district are followed. The Irvington Woods Park invasive vine barberry bush removal program continues. Dates for this month are January 8th and January 22nd. You can register online to volunteer. Any student over age 16 who needs community service hours, this is an excellent opportunity. Senior Citizen Director Joan Armstrong distributed K95 protective masks provided by the county on Friday to senior citizens and will continue to do so this week while supplies last. And finally, we're pleased to announce ISCAB was awarded year 8 of the DFC grant in an amount of $125,000 through 9/30 of 22. As we begin the year, they'll be hosting a town hall to present the most recent survey data on youth alcohol and drug use and attitudes in Irvington on February 2nd. It'll be a virtual meeting. All community members are invited. That's it.
Can I
Great.
ask a question? I just have a question. How does, I guess, the rec department, how do we identify, I guess, families in need? Right? I know that I think the holiday baskets, I think that's great, and that they were able to distribute so many baskets. I'm just wondering how we identify people.
So I believe it's a little bit tricky because it's not that there's a survey or that they go out to ask. I believe there is information supplied by the school district. Larry, if you want to help with that.
I think that's correct. Yeah, I don't know the extent to which they do, but I think they assist in identifying, and then the outreach happens from us, of course.
Yeah, that's my understanding
So,
as well.
Yeah,
And obviously the seniors, they know typically from the senior center, but for the students, the school basically supplies them with the list, is my understanding. So we go with Arlene next, since we don't have an established lineup yet.
I do not have any update, but I have been in touch with people and introducing myself and have some meetings set up this week.
Great.
Looking forward to meeting everyone.
And Mitch, and cleanup spot.
All righty. For the theater, they had a meeting last week where they thanked people who had left the commission. A couple of people have rotated off, including me. And they're still working on doing a lot of the web content while the theater is closed for the repairs. And they should know more this month or next exactly when the theater should be able to open. So she said the next month's meeting should have a lot more news than the last meeting did. As for the library, I was able to speak to one of the reference librarians who put me in touch with Rosemarie Gatzik, so I'm waiting to meet with her. I know they have a bunch of programs for adults coming up. They were going to get me a list, but obviously they didn't get it in time for the meeting, so that'll have to be reported in the next meeting. Also, I touched base with the school board. Dave Graber is the school board member who is the same job I have. He's in charge of being the liaison with the village board, and he gave me a report, some things that the school board wanted to report. A lot of it's related to COVID. The district, obviously, in light of the Omicron surge, has taken a lot of actions related to COVID. They obviously, with the idea that they're taking all the steps to ensure that school environments are as safe as possible for students and staff. The district is in partnership with WCDOH and the Westchester Medical Center to facilitate the weekly surveillance testing that goes on there. They've also implemented the Test to Stay program, which is an opportunity for unvaccinated students who are determined to be close contacts through in-school sources only to remain in school through their quarantine period by participating in daily testing. That would be facilitated by the school staff. If a student tests negative, they could attend school that day for instructional purposes, but they're not going to be allowed to engage in after-school or extracurricular activities. The district is also prepared for the worst-case scenario where they have to go fully remote, and they'll ensure that every student has a district-owned device to make sure that they can access online classes. But they obviously hope that they don't really ever need to do that. They're just preparing just in case. And there was one non-COVID note, and that was that they want everyone to vote for the school district that's the best public school district in the annual Best of Westchester voting. The voting ends on January 19th. The district has won the title 5 of the past 6 years, so they'd like to keep that streak going. You can find a link to vote on the district's Facebook page, or and it'll link you to where you can vote for the village. They really want people to start following their social media accounts, or continue if you already are, that they have on the bottom of their website, because that's the best way to get information out to everybody on these things that could be changing so much and everything. I haven't met anyone with the courts yet, so I have no report from the courts.
Great. So we'll go to the village administrator's report.
So as Trustee Lonke mentioned, there was a distribution of KN95 masks to some seniors. We were given a pretty healthy supply of masks from the county, and we'll be developing a distribution of those to the general public this week. So look for more information on that. There isn't quite the rush for the masks as there was for testing kits, but we don't have any more testing kits. So as soon as we get those, again, we'll obviously distribute those. But in the meantime, we did get some out to seniors with Joan Armstrong's help, and great work on that. Just a reminder that we had a very brief middle of the day meeting last Thursday to appoint 2 new police officers. Stefania Mejia and Jonathan Bloomfield were appointed as police officers. So we did a virtual swearing in, but I think the mayor would like to do something in person at some point. So hopefully we can pull that off soon. So welcome.
Great. And did the county mention if they were going to receive more tests to distribute? Because I haven't gotten an update from anyone in the county yet. I don't think that either, right?
Yeah, they don't know. We had a conference call this afternoon, and there was certainly mention of the tests, but they mentioned that they don't have any, and they're awaiting more supply. So as soon as we hear, we'll have them distributed.
Yeah, I other than that call today, I hadn't heard anything, and I assumed if you did, you would have let us know. So
yeah, of course.
Village clerk treasurer's report.
That's enough.
Other than the audit, village attorney's report. Public comment. Action items, Larry? Don't really have anything.
No.
So I will make a motion to adjourn if I can get a second.
Second.
Nobody? All in favor?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year. And we'll see you next Wednesday, I guess, right?
Happy New Year, everyone.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.